wolf bit me.
I don't think so, Will.
You weren't there, Ralph.
Not all who are bitten change. There must be something wild within.
You've been sleeping all day. How do you feel?
I feel, good. It is Mexican Independence Day.
I never thought I'd meet a good man who looked at me the way you do.
You don't know I'm a good man. Are you crazy?
No. I'm just marking my territory.
We got 5 new murders. What is there about a full moon?
There. Well, you seem pretty helpless now.
Yes.
Power without guilt. Love without doubt. It feels good to be wolf.
Don't look so scared.
It's amazing how, in your own life, there's certain aspects of your life that become stagnant or become flaccid, and don't get used, just parts of your brain and parts of your body and parts of, that's just a part of your life that just doesn't get used and doesn't get electrified, a lot. Well, that's what happens in this film, is a lot of those things get electrified intensely. It's wonderful to look upon wolves as being noble creatures, and it's, I think we have a tendency anyway as human beings to look upon, especially, a member of the animal kingdom that's been annihilated, it's you have a tendency to look upon them with a tremendous amount of dignity and nobility and so on and so forth. And I think they do carry that to a certain degree. They're certainly efficient. They're certainly more suited to the environment they live in than, for instance, humans are. It seemed to me about real life, which that I think was the thing, maybe if anything, that was the thing that was the most curious about it for me, was that there were so many unreal and fantastic things that were taking place in the film, and yet it really seemed to be just about real life. And it really seemed quite real. And not ultimately fantastic in the sense of fantasy. I mean, it didn't seem to be about that at all. It wasn't a monster movie. It wasn't about make-believe.
It's a very noble animal and very honorable animal. As you know, they marry for life. Also, when we were studying wolves, getting ready for this picture, the subservient behavior of the wolves to the dominant wolf is stunning, because it's very recognizable. I mean, it looks like certain Hollywood restaurants. That the way the subservient wolves behave and wag their tails and actually grin and crouch and lick the face of the dominant wolf is astonishing to see, because you've seen it before. I think that we must blend being human and being an animal, and I think that there's one person who has long succeeded at that, and it's Jack Nicholson. Jack and I have been friends for 25 years, and immediately when we first worked together and became friends, it became apparent that Jack was different from other guys, that all the men I knew, including myself, were many men, but certainly at least two. They were who they are when they're hanging around and working, and someone else when they were after a girl. Someone really different, but not Jack. Jack is always who we become when we're after a girl. And he doesn't have to change. He's always in that place. He's always his animal self. There was never a werewolf movie that had sort of the classic stature of Bela Lugosi, let's say, in Dracula. But at the same time, you never forgot the werewolf movies. They're very much part of us. And what's interesting is that even though scene by scene they're not so remarkable, especially when you go back and look at them, their power is greater than we thought. There's no one who hasn't seen one. There's no one who doesn't have memories of them that sort of transcend what they were. It is a powerful myth. I think that if there is a difference, that we set ourselves something tough, which was that ideally you would look at our wolf picture and think, my God, this is really happening. This isn't Carpathia or some mountains in the Dolomites, some village in the Dolomites. This is really happening now, here. New York is a jungle and a zoo and a series of cages. And it's many other things too. It's a glittering prize, it's metropolitan, it's the opera, it's culture, it's everything. But to the extent to which it's everything and everything falling apart, and rich people stepping over starving people, and limousines having their windshields washed for 50 cents by homeless people, and in all these literal and metaphoric senses, New York is the jungle of cities. And our wolf is created by the jungle of cities. We read about all the lycanthropy that took place, and when people were burned supposedly for being werewolves, and about all the beliefs and superstitions and all the ways in which these things are set down. But we also talked about, the Three Little Pigs. In fact, there's a reference to the Three Little Pigs in the movie. Just as the one thing that Michelle refused to do, that she fought me on, was when there's a point at which she meets, as it were, a wolf in the picture. And I wanted her to wear a sweatshirt with a little red hood, and she absolutely refused. And we even had one made. And I said, no one will ever know. It's just, do it for me. Just wear this little red hood. And she just refused. Who doesn't think about wolves, playing with his dog? You go for a walk with your dog, or you feed your dog, or you watch your dog at home. How do you not think back then, this was a wolf, this little cutie here, or this big floppy dog lying on my foot or my bed was a wolf. So that we've always had a connection and continue to have a connection even if we've never seen a wolf. What is interesting to me and prophetic is when Jack and I were shooting Carnal Knowledge in Vancouver in 1968, we went to the Vancouver Zoo, and there were some wolf pups, and we howled at them, and they howled back. And I still remember these, like 6 or 7 little wolf pups howling and howling at Jack, and Jack howling at them. And look at us now. Will, Jack's character, coming into his animal self, is, of course, more attractive to women, more powerful in business. Indeed, you know, if as Alden, the guy who has fired him, says, if I knew you were such a son of a bitch, I would never have fired you. The true New Yorker's statement, how useful you are now that you're combative, competitive, powerful, dominant.
This figure behind me of Jack from Wolf, this was actually the first display figure that we made in my studio. For a makeup like this, which was basically loose hair and a little tiny foam rubber piece and some pointy ears, you don't have anything to show for it. It's not like you have a mask or something that you can show. So I said, let's make a figure. So it's a complete sculpture. I mean, we had a life cast of Jack that we did a press out from and then sculpted it. And I just think, I wanted to have a representation of what that makeup was, which was cool. Mike Nichols is not a monster movie guy, though this wasn't a monster movie, so to speak.
I first met Mike Nichols in 1987. I was trying to get a movie going called Working Girl, which was set in New York. And I almost made it with a director named Jim Bridges, who had done Perfect, and Demi Moore would have been the lead. And the movie fell apart. And I sent the script on a long shot to Mike Nichols, who was in Mississippi shooting Biloxi Blues. And he said, I'm very interested, come to Mississippi. I was a punk. I never made a movie. I did very good training. I worked for Alan Pakula for 4 years, a great filmmaker. So I joined Mike at the set, and he said, I want to make this movie. He was unbelievably kind, collaborative, and that's how our association began.
I think people get confused because Harrison published a novel called Wolf early in his career. I think it's his first novel, but it's not the basis for this film. This is an original story.
And Jim said, I think Jack Nicholson would really like this. Jack was a fan of Jim's work. They knew each other. So I sent it to Jack, and a few days later, he asked me to, I'd met him once or twice, to come up to his house in Mulholland. And I went up to his house in Mulholland, and one of the first things he did is, as I was sitting waiting to see what he was going to say, is he started to curl his lip in a little bit of a wolfish, just to show me, to tease me with how f***ing lucky I was that he was going to take on this character. So he said, yes, he would do it. Jack had obviously worked with Mike Nichols in the past. Carnal Knowledge, Heartburn. But I wasn't sure if Mike was exactly the right director. And yet, at the same time, I was really curious because Mike has such a crystal clear brilliance and such a behavioralist of how he would respond. So I sent him the script, and he basically said, I'm in. Mike was a very intelligent man, and I'm not. So we didn't bond on that level, and I think a number of times he would use words that were beyond my vocabulary. I realized there are two versions of the movie that could have been made. Many, but there were two in particular. What I realized about Mike's version was that a lot of what he brought to Wolf was loss. And this is a death. And this man is experiencing a death. What Jim Harrison and I, and also Jack, had been working with is a celebration of oblivion, whether it's meditation or drugs or just getting the f*** out of your head. So both forces were very much a part of the movie.
I knew that Jack Nicholson had agreed to star in it as Will Randall, the hero. And I knew that Mike Nichols was directing. And I guess I knew that Doug Wick was the producer. And Amy Pascal, who was the head of production, I guess, at Columbia or Sony, whatever it was called in that period, wanted me to come in and do the next rewrite. Our credit says written by Jim Harrison and Wesley Strick. But we never met. I will say I don't think Jim was happy at all to be replaced by me. Nobody ever said that to me directly, but it was pretty obvious from the signals that I picked up. And what made matters a little even more complicated on that score was the fact that Jack Nicholson was a very good friend of Jim Harrison's for many years. I met with Nichols. He was very friendly and just extremely approachable and nice. He seemed happy to know that I was amenable to working on the movie. You know, I guess we talked generally about it. And I think I said to him, probably at that first meeting, I asked him, Mike, what is it that you want from me on this draft? And he said, I want you to write me scenes that I can direct. Wolf was an important film to him because he felt it was an opportunity, not only because he was telling this, at times, darkly funny story about a man's transformation into a wolf, but also because he knew that there were a lot of special effects involved. It was a big budget movie. And I think he was hoping to reinvent himself as a kind of modern, I think he was about 6 years old when we started working together. And he really wanted to stay relevant and to make the kind of bigger budget movies that Hollywood was making then, with big special effects and you know, sort of spectacle. And he was very interested in my collaboration with Tim Burton on the Batman film. And he would ask me all about it. And I think it was part of the reason he was interested in working with me, that he, you know, I was younger, I was still in my 30s then. And he knew that I was sort of plugged into that more kind of current world of Hollywood filmmaking.
From the beginning, Jack would start to experiment with a character, and he would start to experiment with little hisses, little facial changes, and he also did it just to amuse everyone, because he knew how exciting it was. You know, he and Mike had a very alive history, so it went all the way back in their relationship, as they sometimes pushed and pulled. Now Jack was the biggest star in the world. He had a lot of leverage. Mike had once been much more the boss. We looked at a lot of women. Michelle Pfeiffer was in a complete bloom at that time. She was underrated as an actor, and she had a real power. And the way this character was conceived is a slightly lost woman of privilege.
Nichols and Doug Wick and I were all sitting in Doug's office talking, and Doug's assistant knocked on the door and said, "Mr. Jagger is here." And I said, "What, Mick Jagger is here?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, show him in just a moment." And then they explained that Mick had wanted to play the part of Alden when he was going to be Laura's brother, so a somewhat younger man. And because I had petitioned to change that character into the father, it made Mick Jagger no longer a contender for the part. And Doug and Mike turned to me and said, "You have to tell Mick he's not playing the part," which of course terrified me. And then Jagger walked in, he sat down, I broke the news to him. It was very embarrassing, actually.
I got home one night, I live in Westwood Village, and while we were casting, and there was a message on my machine, and it said, "This is Marlon Brando, can you call me?" And so I didn't know if it was real or not, but obviously I revere Marlon Brando. And so I called the number back, and it was about 7:30 at night, and it was Marlon Brando, and Jack had mentioned there might be a part in this movie for him, which would have been Michelle Pfeiffer's father. And so I'm talking to him, and I'm also kind of aware the guy needs money. And right away, I didn't think he was right for it. I thought he would destabilize it too much. He was thought it would become a little too much the Marlon Brando movie. Christopher Plummer, we believed him as Michelle Pfeiffer's father. He's a really talented actor. He had the right look. So he was a good fit. Spader was a very important piece of casting because he was going to be the antagonist. We kind of liked the idea that for this man who was sort of so toxic, that it wouldn't necessarily be his physicality, but a kind of toxic, more his poisons are inflamed by the beast in him.
The moment where Nicholson pees on James Spader's shoes is obviously very memorable. It was in the Jim Harrison script, and to me that epitomizes the voice of Jim Harrison in the movie that I kept in my script. I went down to the Bradbury Building in downtown LA for some of the scenes that were shot with Jack in his office, and it's a great location. It's been used in many films, Blade Runner, I think, most famously.
There's a scene where Jack's in the office building and they wanted him to hear something, and we thought it'd be cool to have his ears actually move. And we made this radio controlled thing that actually, we glued these tabs to the back of Jack's ears, and it mounted on his head. In the back, you couldn't see it, these little servo motors, and it actually moved his real ears around. I thought it was a really kind of cool effect, and it was a fun thing. It kind of almost goes unnoticed, and but I like that. It's also the same with some of the earlier stages of Spader, like when he's in the police station, he has a little bit of hair back here, there's a little bit more going down the back of his neck. The lenses were a lot more obvious, but we just kind of slowly started to put this stuff in, and I enjoyed that. I enjoy subtle makeup. So.
Mike said to me, when you do a myth, the audience wants to feel like this is what it's really like. So that's what he set out to do, to sort of say, yeah, you've seen the werewolf movies. Now we're going to tell you what it's really like. So that was sort of how he proceeded. And I was very aware of Rick Baker's work. And I also knew Rick Baker is the best. And the best in that he has no desire just to replicate genre. He understands all the tools in makeup arts, but he's finally a storyteller.
My interest in makeup started as a kid, and I saw the Universal monster movies on television like most kids in America did. I was the first generation to grow up in front of a television, and I loved those movies. And one that I really loved was the Wolfman, and I loved that whole concept of a transformation and of a combination of an animal and a man. And I decided very early on, I was like 10 years old when I said, I'm going to become a makeup artist, and that's what I'm going to do. And I knew that I liked hairy things, and so I taught myself how to deal with hair. It's kind of a lost art. There's not a lot of makeup artists that are good at actual laying of hair. First I really thought, why are they even coming to me? Because I was known for American Werewolf and this big transformation and all this, and that's not what this film was about, and more than anything, Jack gets the benefits from being bitten by a wolf, becomes more virile and more handsome and stuff. But I was intrigued, I thought, I liked the idea of a more subtle werewolf movie, and a movie that wasn't so much about the monster part of it, but, and Mike, he agreed it should be subtle. And, he said, Jack is already pretty much there, and I thought so too. And I really said, I think, it really is me, laying some hair on him. And instantly in my head, I thought back to what Jack Pierce did on Werewolf of London, which was the first werewolf movie, basically. And it wasn't Jack Pierce, the original concept. Henry Hall, who played the werewolf in the film, thought what Pierce did originally was too much, and he wanted it to be more of his face. So it was very similar makeup, where it's his hair on his face, and he did have this big widow's peak, which we didn't do. But I was thinking along those lines initially. Alan Dangerio, these toupees made for Jack, so his hair would get a little fuller, and it's funny. I had talked to Steve Abrams, who's his straight makeup guy, about doing lifts on him, about actually pulling his skin back and he goes, ooh, I don't know if Jack's going to go for that, and he also, Jack didn't even want to go for the toupees. He would, put dark powder on his scalp to kind of make it look thicker, but he eventually agreed to the toupees. But I remember vividly the day when Steve Abrams was talking to Jack about the facelifts. Jack sitting in the chair, and Steve's very kind of nervous and going, Jack, because you're supposed to be getting younger and better looking, and through the course of this, we wanted to do what we'll many times do on actresses, which is, we'd put these tape lifts on and pull it back, and it goes behind your wig, and it, makes you look younger, and Jack looks at him, just didn't say anything to the whole nervous speech of Steve Abrams, and then he went, absolutely not. So that was the end of that.
I went to the Columbia a lot for some of the scenes that Nicholson shot with Ampuri, which was a sort of fun thing to watch, and a couple of scenes with Michelle. But so I probably sat and watched Mike shoot and I was very intrigued by the way he shot, because he had his editor, Sam Osteen, with him.
Sam Osteen had seen everything, done everything. He was a very good collaborator. He was very practical. He was the best.
Mike would set up a shot and Sam would look at it and tell Mike whether he thought the coverage was right and whether he thought he had covered the scene adequately before he moved on. So he was very methodical about that. Nichols was very professional. Mike was interested in the thought that it was maybe this whole movie was about the death of God. That was something he repeated a lot. And he asked me if I felt that way. And I didn't really know what he was talking about, but I thought it was worth discussing. There is a soliloquy that Nicholson delivers in the film where he talks about the end of civilization, and he says maybe the world has already ended. And he proceeds to talk about how culture has been degraded to the point where civilization is essentially over. And when I listened to that the other night, rewatching Wolf, I remembered that this was sort of a refrain of Mike's. And I had heard him sort of give a speech along these lines at least 4 or 5 times in the course of our discussions about the movie. And I essentially paraphrased it for Nicholson's lines about maybe the world is already dead and gone. And I think that was kind of Mike's feeling about Western civilization. I mean, he didn't live to see the election of Donald Trump, but that might have confirmed for him his suspicion that we had spun out of control. And in a way, I think that was one of the themes of Wolf that he was, I think, telling.
When we did our first preview in Dallas, we were still finding the tone of the movie. The first few times when Jack jumped, and they were big jumps, the audience burst into laughter. And other parts of the movie they loved, but it made us very aware, and it was a very early preview just to see how really just to put it up and see what was working. But it really bitch slapped us and made us aware that finding this tone where those jumps were enough of an expression of character, that the audience believed them, and they finally ended up working very, very well. But it was a real wake-up call about how tricky the tone would be. The studio was feeling anxious. So basically, to alleviate their anxiety, we put in like a $700,000 shot of Jack jumping over something in the end. And Mike was funny about it, because he sort of said, well, look, this will be like $700,000 of aspirin for them. And it was a little more theatricality, but we never really, I think, addressed not that everything is perfect or everything operates at its full power. It was a great shot. But the things that were exciting in it, you kept feeling a little bit that maybe it could get to actual greatness, and the ending could really clobber you emotionally or intellectually. And that we never quite got to.